The sacking of Dan Ashworth has shocked Manchester United fans. What happened? Why was he sacked only 5 months into his job as United's first true sporting director? Let me run through the inside story of what has been reported by The Athletic, BBC, The Telegraph and The Times as we piece together the story of a broken relationship with Jim Ratcliffe and how the decision to keep Erik has contributed to Dan Ashworth being sacked. The sacking of Dan Ashworth caught us all by surprise. And what's come out now is a lot more information. So what I'm going to do in this video, as I've just explained there, is run through all of it, give you a summary of what The Athletic, BBC, Telegraph and The Times have all said about his sacking and the relationship with Ratcliffe, with Berrada, the Ten Hag decision, being frozen out. Lots more info in this video. You can let me know what you think about it all in the comments below. But yeah, when this happened on Sunday morning, I think it was, nobody saw that coming. And the official statement came out about an hour and a half later after The Athletic broke it first. And all credit to The Athletic, who I keep saying, well, everyone knows it. It's not as if I need to say this, but they are the top tier when it comes to genuine information and being first to stories. And I'm going to start with The Athletic here. And this article from Laurie Whitwell and from Adam Crafton as well. Go and subscribe to The Athletic and you read the whole thing. But I'm going to summarize the main points that it gets across for you here. All right, let's run through it. And they start with this. That Ashworth was the closest to Ten Hag, and he pushed for him to get the extension. And Ratcliffe was one of the voices that was against that idea. And it's not just The Athletic who was saying this as well. This is kind of corroborated across the different sources. And that's what you can do here by looking at what The Athletic and the BBC and the Telegraph and the Times, and you can see where the repeated patterns are. You start to really understand what the truth actually is. Athletic also saying that Ratcliffe wasn't happy with how Ashworth acted with Ten Hag in terms of the replacements that he offered. Eddie Howe and Marco Silva and Graham Potter as an interim. And that Ratcliffe actually wanted somebody who had a bit more charisma. And also he was annoyed that basically Ashworth was saying the people that he knew from England rather than suggesting bringing anybody else in. And that Ratcliffe was not happy that Ashworth suggested bringing in a data company to refine results because he was like, well, we're paying you. That's your job to know this. Ashworth had very little input on Amrim, The Athletic is saying. It was Berrada who led and flew out to Portugal, of course, which kind of undermined the role itself. I thought this was a bit of a weird one. The summer transfer activity being pulled into question, I don't think that's a stick to beat Ashworth with. I think it's, first of all, too early to judge, according to what I always feel about waiting for a full season. But also, Mazraoui's been very good. I think Ugarte's growing into it. I think Delic's been solid. Xerxes, there's biggest question marks around him. And Yoro, he hasn't started yet. So I think it's a bit harsh to really use that. Anyway, Ratcliffe was angry at Ashworth and Berrada saying that Ten Hag extension decision was made before their arrival. And again, that's been repeated across a lot of different sources too. Question marks from Ratcliffe over whether due diligence was done in identifying Ashworth as the right man. Well, that's got to fall onto Dave Brailsford more than anybody else, because he was the man who put this structure together. And if he wasn't the right man, that's Brailsford's fault. And Ashworth down there being reluctant to agree to staff reductions as part of the redundancies, and that didn't sit well with Ratcliffe. So the main thing I'm getting from reading The Athletic is that breakdown of relationship between Ratcliffe and Ashworth directly. Let's move on to the BBC here, saying, did Ashworth pay the price for United's mediocrity? And they start off really by suggesting that Ashworth kind of got frozen out of the decision-making process at Manchester United. That Ashworth had been totally professional in everything he did, but rather than muddle along, United took the difficult decision to act quickly. And in that sense, look, Ashworth effectively, what's happened here, it's a very expensive probation period. That's what it's turned out. First 6 months, you can just get sacked. Or maybe that's built into the contract. If you get sacked within 6 months, you don't get a payoff. I very much doubt it. Anyway, and look, this has been reiterated by a lot of places as well. But basically, Ashworth is being blamed for the decision to keep Erik Ten Hag, and that Ratcliffe was a big vocal voice that wanted Ten Hag to be sacked, and he had to be persuaded for him to keep his job. Multiple sources have told BBC that Ratcliffe's view in the summer was that Ten Hag should go and that he had to be convinced otherwise. Some figures at Old Trafford are speculating that this may well be an assertion of authority by Berrada, which was my sort of gut feeling when I reacted to it on Sunday, and that too many cooks suggested one source. it didn't really feel like it was too many cooks, but I don't know. Maybe the roles sort of blended. But that's the BBC and The Athletic, and you can see the story sort of developing itself here. Now, this is from The Telegraph, and this is what James Duck is reporting here. The Ashworth's exit comes after he failed to gel with Barada and Wilcox, rather than focusing on the breakdown of relationship between Ashworth and Ratcliffe. And again, the same thing here. It was better to bite the bullet and make the decision now rather than allowing it to fester. And in that part, I do agree with. Both of these statements can be correct at the same time. Ineos can be praised for making the decision to get rid of him now rather than waiting when it probably wouldn't have fixed itself. But also, at the same time, you should not have made that mistake in the first place. So you're basically fixing the wound that you've created that didn't need to be created. Down here, it is understood that Ashworth encountered much more crossover in terms of roles and responsibilities at Old Trafford and did not hold the power or authority he probably envisaged. I'd say that's quite a worrying one. In terms of the structure, I felt like I knew what it was. Omar Barada was a CEO, overseeing the overall vision of United. Dan Ashworth is a sporting director, being the man in charge of the wheel, making sure everybody's got what they need to do everything. And Jason Wilcox is a technical director, more on the ground at Carrington and linking what's going on there in the training ground back into the sporting director to make sure it fed the vision. I understood what it was. Apparently not. Apparently it kind of changed. Barada and Wilcox both wanted to sack Ten Hag as well. So that's Barada, Wilcox and Ratcliffe who all wanted to sack Ten Hag according to reports. And it was Ashworth who led the decision to keep him. And it was a massive mistake. And in business, when you make massive mistakes, there are victims. There are fall guys. Ashworth, it certainly seems, is falling on the Ten Hag sword here. And Telegraph also reporting that United are in no rush to appoint a replacement, and the role will likely have to change if someone does come in. So far, the emphasis has been on a breakdown in a relationship between Ashworth and Ratcliffe. A lot of it centres around what happened with Erik Ten Hag and replacing Ten Hag, and also for the fact that Ratcliffe had built better rapport and a relationship with Barada and Wilcox. And final one I want to run through here is The Times, and a lot of what's been reported here is also reported in The Times. All right, let's go into looking at this. Breakdown in a relationship with Ratcliffe, the most important aspect is what they focus on. Tension had begun to grow between Ashworth and other members of the United hierarchy, including the club's co-owner, Ratcliffe. So it's a lot of it feels, and I've said this quite a few times now, I'm a bit concerned that Ratcliffe seems so involved at this stage, but maybe that should be expected of a man who's put 1.3 billion of his own money in. He's going to be hands-on at the start. Maybe it was foolish of me to think that he wouldn't be. But that's just a concern that I do have. Said that quite a few times. Ratcliffe praising Barada in the UWS interview was seen as confirming his belief in the CEO rather than, well, the fact that Ashworth didn't get a mention, really. Wilcox is going to be taking over the duties in the short term. And again, it is reiterated that Ratcliffe wanted Ten Hag to be sacked and had to be persuaded otherwise. That, for me, feels like the biggest thing that keeps reoccurring. Related to Ashworth pushing for Ten Hag to stay and ultimately that being a massive mistake. And it was, let's be honest, it was a mistake I think quite a few of us made. I made it. But I'm not sporting director of Manchester United, thankfully. Otherwise the club would be in an absolute pit. But Ashworth and Ratcliffe clearly didn't get on. And a lot of this feels like it's a Ratcliffe-driven decision. But at the same time, I think that Barada is heavily involved in this process. Of course, Barada gave him the news at Old Trafford. The suggestion there that Barada and Wilcox have built a very good rapport with Ratcliffe, unlike Ashworth. And it is a mess of a situation, right? That's the inside story of what's been reported everywhere. It's the biggest mistake that Ineos... Actually, I think the biggest mistake that Ineos made was not sacking Ten Hag in the summer. But ultimately, that was a decision that was led by Dan Ashworth. So if you're going to be looking at the root cause analysis, then the bigger mistake is Dan Ashworth. Yeah, it's a mess of a situation. And Ineos were going to make mistakes when they came in at Manchester United. This is a particularly big one. Now, you can let me know what you think in the comments below on Ratcliffe's involvement and whether you think any of this is unfair to put onto Ashworth. But it's messy, it's ugly. But one thing I do feel strongly is I'd rather it was cut now than for us to just drift through the season and hope that it was going to change. And that in itself is decisive, even if it's correcting a problem that was their own doing in the first place. Let me know what you think.